believe we're now, great, thank you. We are now being recorded. So good afternoon, everybody. This is the North Sydney Local Planning Panel meeting, and we are here today to discuss 3 planning proposals that have been submitted to North Sydney Council. If I can just briefly advise of the Local Planning Panel's role in considering planning proposals. This panel merely makes a recommendation to the council in terms of advising it. It is then a matter for the council to make the decision on whether the planning proposals proceed to gateway. So I just want to emphasise that this local planning panel merely makes a recommendation.
Oh, sorry, Jan, we can't hear you. Jan, sorry, we can't hear you. No.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Right, okay. For some reason it's going on and out. If I could ask everybody that's not speaking to mute, just because we have had a few difficulties with the connection. So this panel, as I said, will only be making a recommendation to the council. It is the very early stages in these rezonings. If, for example, they do proceed to a gateway, or it's recommended that they do, they would have to go through a full public exhibition prior to any matters being adopted. So I just wanted to emphasise that this is very early stage of the rezoning process, and there would be a full public exhibition period if they do proceed. So the first, and I'll just introduce the panel. I'm Jan Morell. I've been the chair of this panel for many years, and my previous experience is a town planner of some 40 years. My last full-time job was Commissioner Land and Environment Court, and these days I just sit on planning panels, either chair them or as an expert, both state and local. Can I ask the other panel members to briefly introduce themselves? James Harrison.
Yes, James Harrison. I'm a planning expert, and I spent 40 years in both local government and in private practice. But for the last 2 years, my role has been confined to working on planning panels for various councils around metropolitan Sydney.
Thank you, James. Veronique?
Yeah, I'm the community representative on the panel. And I have qualifications in planning and law, and I act in the best interest of an outcome for the community.
Thank you. And Michael Raymond.
Lawyer and former councillor on North Sydney.
Thank you. And we have all completed conflict of interest forms. I have no conflict. Can every member confirm no conflict?
Yes, I've got no conflict.
No conflict.
No conflict from me.
Thank you very much.
No conflict for me.
Right, we do have a bit of feedback. Okay, so the first planning proposal before us this afternoon is 378 to 390 Pacific Highway, North Sydney. And this is to amend the building height and establish an FSR of 7.5 to 1. We have a number of submitters who wish to address the panel this afternoon. So I will first invite Bruce and Rosie Donald. And
Good afternoon.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the panel. My name is Bruce Donald. As you can see, I represent my daughter, Rosie Donald, who is at work and cannot attend. She made a submission in the matter. She is the owner and our family assist her in Unit 18, 20 to 26 Hume Street on the corner of Hume and Nicholson. I'm also authorised to speak on behalf of the Wiggins family, who similarly are at work and can't be present. They are Unit 23 in the same block on the corner of Hume Street and Nicholson. We support the council's recommendation that this not proceed to gateway. We are now at the start, sadly, of the attempt to build what we might call the Great Western Wall of Crow's Nest. There's a great risk that there will be a wall running basically from Rocklands Avenue, 1.5 kilometres all along the Western Highway to St Leonard's, from about 14 to 25 stories high. That's a great block. The planning process up to this point has, not to put too fine a point on it, been a fraud on the community. It all began really with the planning for the metro station, which, as everybody will recall, when the hoardings went up, there was a lovely 4 to 6 story building above the metro station, and the 2036 planning process had not begun. The very first community consultation suddenly appeared with about a 30-story building above the metro station, and we were informed by the Premier that she had graciously downgraded that from a 50-story proposal as part of a so-called transition to Crow's Nest from what frankly is the planning disaster of St Leonard's. Then the 2036 plan came in, and the residents and the local precinct became closely involved in it, making recommendations to try and preserve a transition on the basis of which we'd all purchased properties, making very substantial family investments in this part of the world. The zoning, as you'll see from the report, was B4 along the highway and R3 along Nicholson Street. That provided a base for transition to the high caliber and high quality residential neighbourhood of East Wollstonecraft. And it was on the basis of that that we all made our investments. The 2036 process came in, and we made submissions to it saying that, yes, we acknowledged there was need for transition. We acknowledged the role of the metro station, but that at the very most, you should be looking at 12 stories on the highway, grading down to maintain the transition to this high quality urban environment. The draft plan came in with 18 stories on that site. And we were quite horrified because this was going to take all the sky and light away from the residences on the western side of the highway. And we made submissions to that effect. We secured one meeting with the Department of Planning and sought to make that point. Then, of course, the final plan came in with no further consultation, and the 18 was suddenly 24. I think it's not to put too fine a point on it that the community felt entirely dudded by the process. And now we come to the pointy end of the planning process where you as the panel are the first people to begin to deal with the hard decisions that are going to flow from that disastrous planning decision. And what is essential is that we try desperately now to recoup some semblance of planning sensibility for the very thing that the 2036 plan said had to be emphasised, namely a proper transition from the metro area down into the urban neighbourhood, the suburban neighbourhood. This proposal does not do that. It just seeks to optimise the building site and envelope all along Nicholson Street, massive amounts of sky. If this is repeated, as I said, into the Great Wall of Western Wall of Crow's Nest, there will be no sky, there will be no ambience for the 4 or 5 blocks west of the Pacific Highway. It is crucial that the developers and the planners apply far more analytical thinking to implement the dictate in the 2036 plan for proper transition into the suburban environment. I don't want to say any more than that. It is a high responsibility that you as panel members have, and the community looks to you to start bringing, as I said, some semblance of propriety into the process, which so far, frankly, has been lacking. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Donald. Now, your wife, I presume, Rosie, is she?
No, my daughter. She's my
Yes.
daughter, Rosie. Yeah.
Yep.
She requires my assistance in management of the property because of her personal circumstances.
Thank you very much, Mr. Donald. Daniel McNamara. Do we have Daniel McNamara online?
Thank you, Jan,
Yes.
and panel.
Thank you. Yep.
Our submission is made on behalf of the owners of 398 Pacific Highway, Crow's Nest, which is a property to the immediate north of the subject site, which comprises a 5-storey existing building with 18 apartments and ground floor commercial space. which is importantly all held in single title. So our most significant concern is for the proponent borrowing amenity across our site's common boundary by assuming a reduced building separation and thereby limiting the future potential development of our site. The apartment design guide, specifically part 2, provides various tools that support the strategic planning process when preparing planning controls for any site. And they're intended to help achieve better design and planning for residential apartment developments and mixed-use developments such as this. Part 2B suggests the building envelope set the appropriate scale of future development, and Part 2F defines separation distances required to ensure that new development is scaled to support the desired future character with appropriate massing and spaces between buildings to assist in providing residential amenity, including visual and acoustic privacy, natural ventilation, sunlight, daylight access, and outlook. So the proposal seeks a maximum building height of 24 stories, to which essentially no objection is raised. However, for buildings in excess of 9 stories, a 24-metre building separation is required for the reasons stated previously. A 12-metre separation of the proponent's tower to the northeast boundary of the site is therefore suggested to be required, and only 6 metres is provided. Separation is not only required for visual privacy as suggested by the proponent, but also to ensure the appropriate massing and spaces between the buildings to assist in providing the residential amenity I've mentioned previously. Creating blank walls or whole of building screens, as is suggested in the documentation for the northern elevation of the building to address privacy issues, is not considered appropriate. So it's suggested that habitable windows on this elevation would be necessary to maximise solar access and residential amenity, and to also ensure a high quality, appearance of the northern facade for the building elevation. There is no solar access analysis provided considering a potential development on our site set back 12 metres from this shared boundary, noting the proponent relies upon deeply recessed north-facing balconies and living room windows to achieve necessary solar access to meet ADG requirements. Council acknowledges these various concerns, and these are shared within the report. The second sort of issue is in relation to the potential isolation of our property. It's claimed by the applicant, and I quote, "The proponent has acted in good faith and attempted to secure the land to the north and the west of the site prior to lodging the planning proposal. So to make clear, no formal valuation has been received nor offer proffered by the proponent to incorporate our site into any development proposal. So a single perfunctory approach has been made through agents to discharge this perceived obligation. We responded to that to let them know we do have a willingness to either negotiate the sale of our land or potentially the air rights above the land, but did not receive any further response from the proponent. It's further suggested that we should just simply amalgamate with the site to the north. However, the site to the north incorporates 80 strata titled properties, making any short-term, medium-term proposition for redevelopment unlikely. Again, I stress, our property, whilst 5 stories in height and containing 18 units, is essentially held in one title and available for redevelopment. We have expressed the willingness to discuss opportunities for the purchase or redevelopment of our site, given the available increase from 5 to 24 stories and significant increases in the density available, or to discuss with the proponent the sale of air rights, perhaps allowing the proponent to build to a 0 lot boundary, or to partly cantilever the building across our property, or to demolish and restart on a large consolidated site area, to which we've had no further response. The proposal should otherwise be modified to support a compliant building envelope on the proponent's site. We otherwise support the council's recommendation at this stage.
Thank you very much, Mr. McNamara. The next, and you are a town planner representing the owners of the adjoining property to
That's
the north.
correct. Yep.
Right, thank you. John Hancox. Thank you, Mr. Hancox. Thank you. You're on mute, unfortunately. No, you're on mute still. So you have to unmute before we can hear you. Peter, are you there?
Yep, you're still on mute. Oh, that's it.
Yes, thank you.
Hear me now?
Yep. Yes, thank you.
Okay. I'm the chairman of the Wollstonecraft precinct and have been since 2016. The St Leonard's Crow's Nest draft plan for 2036 was exhibited for public consultation, closing in February 2019. At that time, the site for this proposal showed a height limit of 18 stories, to which the precinct vehemently protested in our submissions. When the final 2036 plan was published in August 2020, the Department of Planning, without reference to the community or to North Sydney Council, had uplifted 21 sites across the whole plan with additional heights without justification or explanation. The height limit for this site on the block between Hume Street and Oxley Street is now 24 stories, representing an uplift of 6 stories from the draft plan and a abhorrent amount of increase in height to what the community would prefer. It's no secret that the North Sydney Council has supported a recommendation from the precinct that they should object to the planning minister about this increase in height. And we leave it at that we hope that the council will be successful in eventually getting that height limit reduced. In the meantime, the assessment of this proposal by North Sydney Council Strategic Planning Group proves beyond doubt that the proposal represents significant overdevelopment. Precinct agrees with this conclusion. Our assessment of the proposal was centred on excessive height and density, solar access impacts on the properties to the west of Nicholson Street and on Hume Street, and car parking spaces. North Sydney Council has gone further in its assessment by demonstrating that the site is too small for the proposed towers, with problems of separation on the northern boundary and transition in the western boundary, to which the previous speaker has addressed his comments. The matter of car parking is very important to the community at large because this site is just across the Pacific Highway from the new metro station. Transport for New South Wales advocates that for sites in close proximity to public transport, that consideration be given to reducing the number of car parking spaces in these buildings and other methods of reducing congestion, such as car sharing and active transport, even walking. North Sydney Council has shared our view and recommended that the number of car parking spaces conform to the limit set for other rail stations in the local government area of North Sydney. For the reasons so expertly summarised in the assessment report, the proposal should be refused by the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hancox. Sue Yelland is my next one to make a submission. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Hello.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. I'm a resident of Wollstonecraft and I live about 5 minutes walk from this site. I was going to talk about the 2036 draft plan, the height that was displayed there, how we ended up with 24 stories, but the first speaker has covered that, so I won't at this stage mention that. North Sydney Council's excellent and comprehensive report suggests that this proposal represents an overdevelopment of a site too small to accommodate the anticipated scale and bulk of a 24-storey building. As indicative of this statement, I'd like to draw your attention to the 5 pages of Council's report, commencing on page 22, dealing with the issue of building transition and setbacks. This section points out the minimum ADG requirements for site setbacks to ensure privacy, sunlight and ventilation to provide adequate living amenity for the people who will live in this building. But importantly, the ADG requirements also ensure the avoidance of excessive overshadowing impacts to protect the living amenity of the hundreds of people who already live nearby to this site. Particularly, I would ask you to consider figure 21 on page 24. This shows the applicant's proposal, which seems to be a less than desirable design in an attempt to meet, in some respect, ADG tower separation guidelines for part of the northern elevation. Having habitable rooms surrounding this small indented area on the northern elevation of the building would seem to create a very poor living amenity. I agree with Council's summation. The design as submitted is clearly an overdevelopment of this small site. It needs to be considerably scaled back. I'd also like to address the issue of traffic and car parking, which the previous speaker has alluded to, so I will try and cut down what I was going to say about that. The proposal includes a total of 132 parking spaces. For a site, one pedestrian crossing away from the metro, a short distance from St Leonard's Station, and with a multitude of bus services at its front door, this amount of parking is clearly excessive. I was also going to refer you to page 60 of the 2036 plan, which talks about councils needing to reduce parking on sites adjacent to the metro. So I would like to commend the council for addressing this issue. I strongly support council's recommendation that car parking rates for this development, and indeed across the entire 2036 plan area, be reduced to be in line with those which apply around St Leonard's train station and in areas around other train stations in the North Sydney Council area. At certain times of the day, traffic in the Crow's Nest St Leonard's area is already at capacity, and with the amount of future development proposed for this area, cumulative traffic impacts must be addressed. One way to do that is to reduce reliance on cars as a means of transport. Just want to address a couple of things that the speaker speaking on behalf of 398 Pacific Highway said. I understand a lot of that submission was related to setbacks, which I totally agree with. I also noted that they have no objection to the 24-storey height. I think, considering the way the 24 stories was put on this site, it's much too high for the site and for the surrounding locality. I think that's all I want to say about that. I just think that the proposal as submitted should not receive support. It's way too much for the site and the area and the future of Crow's Nest. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yelland. And from the community, I also have observing only David and Jeanette Milston. But if you wish to make a comment or make a submission to the panel, please let yourself be known to us. And I just need to check with the Secretariat. Peter, we have people in the conference room of the council. Were they on this item or the next item?
I'm just unclear of their interest in it, but they are, I can see on our camera, they are observing, so they're able to continue, but I don't believe they're registered to speak.
Very well. Okay, then. And now on the applicants team, we have Ben Hopkins, Sophie Purton, Lucian Gormley and Peter Adam. Is everybody present?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Now, in addressing the panel, if you could please refer to the issues that have been raised by submitters in your response and your address. Thank you very much. And I'm in your hands as to who wishes to present first.
Thanks. Thanks, Jan, and thanks to the panel members. And my name's Sophie Purton, so I'll begin today, and Lucian and Ben can also speak to answer some of the questions raised by the objectors. Today we're speaking, sorry? Yeah, so today we're speaking on behalf of the planning proposal at 378 to 390 Pacific Highway. I've listened to what's been said in the room today, so I will respond to those issues raised by the objectors as I go along. But fundamentally, we've read the council officer's report and we disagree with the claims that the planning proposal is inconsistent with the 2036 plan. And today we're here to request that the panel recommend that the planning proposal proceed to Gateway. And a number of the issues raised by the objectors are fundamentally in relation to the plan itself. And that plan, it's undergone extensive community consultation and it's underpinned by built form testing that's been done by SJB, and that's also been looked at and endorsed by the government architect. The plan's nominated heights, FSRs, street wall heights, setbacks, and overshadowing controls. The ministerial direction invites proponents to submit planning proposals in accordance with the plan. So on this basis, my client has purchased 4 lots, and that comprises 1,300 square meters. So that's a substantial site area, and that is a site that is capable of supporting a tower form. This site was identified for a 24-story tower, and that's what we've done here. We're simply submitting a planning proposal that is fully compliant with the numerical controls in the plan. We're seeking to amend the LEP and height controls. So the issues raised by the community in regards to design, car parking and the like are not matters that we're here to discuss today. We're simply showing you how one building envelope could fit within the controls that the plan has nominated for the site. We do note the concerns raised regarding building transition and separation for both the north and the western sides. So in relation to the north, our building design includes both a habitable and non-habitable setbacks. Habitable and non-habitable facade typologies. Our building envelope that we're presented in the scheme is fully compliant with the ADG controls for those non-habitable and habitable setbacks. So I don't believe that as this is the case, we're not affecting the northern site's ability to redevelop, and we're not borrowing amenity from them because we are fully compliant. So what they could do on their side is also a fully compliant scheme. And we've done numerous urban design studies, and those studies demonstrate that the most likely development scenario would be 2 tower forms, one of them being on the northern corner and one of them being on our site, and that would create a substantial separation. In regards to the western boundary, and just going back to saying that the minimum separation is 24 meters. If you look at part 2 of the ADG, it actually says that the separation would be between 12 and 24 meters, and that accommodates for buildings that have non-habitable to habitable or habitable to habitable separation distances. So to say that the minimum would be 24 meters is factually incorrect. In regards to the western boundary, unlike other sites in the precinct, the plan doesn't actually nominate a rear setback control for our site. So we have sought to address this transition issue, and just looking at the podium in particular, we've adopted a terraced landscape podium form, and this podium form, it's completely compliant with council's DCP controls that apply to mixed use zones where they interface with residential zones. So in this instance, we have setbacks varying from 4 meters to 12 meters. And this is also consistent with the established building forms to the north and reflects the diagrams in the plan, which encourages a step setback transition. So we believe we have done what we can within the design to create a positive urban outcome here and provide that separation and transition. In regards to the tower, we don't believe that an increased ADG separation is required, and the tower form is compliant because there's no interface issue here. The sites to the west of our site, under the plan, they've been mapped for 4 stories. So there'd be no future tower form opposing the tower on our side. Again, we've tried to address this issue by elevating the tower and providing for increased light and air to penetrate through the podium. And that's going to provide increased amenity to the western neighbours. And Lucian can speak to the positive urban design outcomes and positive amenity outcomes that that will be created by this design solution. And I think it needs to be acknowledged that the state government has mapped that western site as 4 stories and mapped our site as 24 stories. And we're simply presenting a planning proposal that is consistent with that plan. The 4 stories, the sites to the west are the sites that are intended to provide the transition to the lower density areas. What the state government has done is a deliberate approach, and the contrast has been considered in the extensive urban design work that's been undertaken. And to some of the points raised by Sue and some of the other panel members stating that this is an overdevelopment and it's going to have negative solar access impacts. Well, council's report actually states that we retain the 2-hour solar access to the western neighbours, so we're fully compliant with that regard. And our slender tower ensures that overshadowing impacts are short term. Our proposal doesn't impact key view, and council is satisfied that there's a sufficient building design. So in our view, that these are all positive comments that demonstrate that there is site-specific merit and overwhelming evidence to support the planning proposal to progress to a gateway determination. We're happy, as Jan, you mentioned at the start, this is at a very preliminary stage in the process, and we do have a long way to go in terms of finessing the detailed design matters. But, this is a planning proposal. We are seeking to amend the height and FSR in accordance with what the state government has mapped on our site. And we will be working with council to address any of the detailed design matters at the relevant DA stage.
Thank you. So Lucian, do you wish to address this? And I don't know who's going to also address the issue that was raised about site isolation and the property to the north. Lucian?
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, I think Ben will talk a little bit about amalgamation. My name's Lucian. I'm an architect with Woods Bagot. I just want to start by acknowledging the significant piece of work that's been done by the state and local government in delivering the St Leonard's Crow's Nest 2036 plan. Obviously, the plan will help facilitate fantastic outcomes for the development of the local area of Crow's Nest, and in conjunction, with a new metro station 5 k's from the CBD, the potential for invigoration of the precinct in our site is actually quite exciting. So, as Sophie mentioned, the 2036 plan has been extensively tested by government, and whilst there's always going to be...
Can I just say, we don't need to hear about the 2036 plan again. I think Sophie's more than elaborated on or repeated what it provides for. I'm interested in what the merits of this are in terms of the site-specific strategic merit.
Yeah, no worries. And look, we've looked at, there's always going to be minor variations around amalgamations. There's a lot of detailed work that's in our report that supports that, but our client and design teams, we've worked very hard to realise a design that is compliant with the plan, and it allows for the realisation of an appropriate piece of architecture that supports and strengthens the future potential of the fabric. So just to touch on the proposal design very quickly, we believe that the architecture does respond and demonstrate strategic and site-specific merit. It demonstrates a clean and simple resolution of the residential tower, and it focuses on balancing amenity, scale, solar access. It demonstrates an innovative and exciting response to the space between the tower and the podium, and it provides a significant greening element in there, which we think contributes to the sparseness of what is the Pacific Highway at the moment, and really establishes a marker for what is a prominent corner site within the precinct. The podium relief as well creates, at this junction, it serves to sort of create and release the bulk of the tower and the built form, and it's going to allow light and solar access to pass through the site east and west. So it's very important. Our proposal demonstrates grounded podium. It establishes a new street widening for the Pacific Highway, which is going to lead to better at-grade outcomes for pedestrians and community. And really it strengthens and activates the facades in these locations. And, as it contributes to the continuation of Hume Street, as it moves east towards Willoughby, we feel as it's going to create a new vibrant and exciting precinct for the community. So look, if I could just close out, look, as Sophie said, there is a long way to go in the delivery of this project and the realisation of its potential. As a team, what we've done is everything we can to balance the preliminary architecture and urban design response with the required commercial drivers and align all of those outcomes to be compliant with aspects of the plan. The finer grain, the finer resolution absolutely is to wash out. We know that, and we're committed to working with the local government and stakeholders and the community to satisfy those requirements going forward. But we're in a planning proposal at the moment, and at this stage of the project, we feel that the architectural contribution, we feel that we meet all the requirements and the objectives under the 2036 plan, and we request the panel to support our proposal and its ambition for Crow's Nest and its alignment with the 2036 plan. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gormley. And does Peter Adam wish to?
So Ben Hopkins here, Jan. Peter Adam works for Futuro Capital. I'm the director of Futuro Capital. We've got one of our other owners here as well, Phil George. So I'll talk on perspective of we're the owners of the site and the developer of the site. I'll probably just touch upon a couple of things to the panel. So we've already covered sort of all the planning aspects and the architectural integrity, what we've looked to do with the site to be able to get to a planning proposal and get that approved to Gateway. Just to give you some further background to the northern site of Pacific Highway, we have had multiple offers to them in terms of amalgamating their site, both on an air rights situation and amalgamating with the land as well. They fell on deaf ears and they basically could never make a commercial outcome. And we're happy to provide any of that evidence to the panel because what was said by the previous person who was talking on behalf of the proponent is not true. So basically, no commercial outcome could be made in terms of amalgamation to the north. We've also
one moment. Did you provide that to the council?
We did provide. We weren't asked to provide any of the commercial arrangements, but we did say to them in various meetings that we had previous meetings with the neighbouring properties and made offers to the neighbouring properties, and we could not get a commercial outcome because they were basically asking for double the amount that we paid for our site.
Okay, so my question is, did you provide any documentary evidence to the council about the multiple offers?
We're happy to do so. We haven't provided any. We've just told them when we had various meetings with the council.
Okay.
We did provide a written response to council outlining the dates and when we tried to contact both the northern and western neighbours. So that was documented in a letter by Futuro Capital to the council.
Right. Okay. All right then. Nothing further you wish to address the panel with, Mr. Hopkins?
No, look, we bought this on behalf of, in line with the 2036 plan. We could fully compliant to the 2036 plan. And so we just want to have an outcome that is fair and equitable in terms of the ministerial direction that's been done. Thank you.
I might just add, in regards to the site isolation, council's own assessment report does say that it can't be said that the northern site itself is an isolated site because it still has a development potential or the potential to redevelop with the site to the further north. So we did do a fair bit of study to demonstrate that it was an isolated site, and the assessment report also confirms that it's not an isolated site.
Okay, very well. Nothing further. So I noticed that someone came on the screen that was listening. I presume, Mr. Milston, you did not wish to make any representations to the panel. It's fine, you don't need to, but I just did notice. Yeah, okay, thank you. Fine. Very well. Well, I would like to thank everybody for their assistance to this panel in making its deliberations, which will then be just a recommendation as opposed to an approval or refusal of this, a recommendation to the council, who then are the ones that are charged with making the decision whether it proceeds to Gateway. So I would like to thank everybody for their assistance, and we will make deliberations later in the day, and we will provide our recommendation to the council, which will be on the public website within the next 7 days or less. So thank you all for making your contributions. That now takes us to the next matter, which is item number 2 on the agenda. And I have item number 2, which is 20 Berry Street, North Sydney. And this is to amend the LEP to provide for an increase in height and a change in the zone from B4 to B3. I don't have any submitters who wish to address the panel on this matter. Is there anybody online who wishes to address the panel to make yourself known? Otherwise, I will invite the applicants team to address the panel. I would just like to say, I noticed that there are some people still on from the previous call, but I would just like to say that the panel members have inspected these sites to provide them with an informed position, as well as having the benefit of the council officers' reports, and similarly for this item as well. So in that regard, I will ask the applicants team for item number 2, Sue Francis, Carl May, Anro Morris, and David, oh no, observing only. So once again, you're put in the wrong column, but not to worry, fine, thank you very much. So could I invite Sue Francis, I'm in your hands as to how you would like to present.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start off as outlining the planning side of things, and I'll let Anroy and Carl deal with the architectural, but specifically to go into some detail about the solar access, because fundamentally that's what this planning proposal is about. You mentioned that it was an increased height and change in zone. That actually wasn't what our original planning proposal was for. It was actually to introduce a new special area, because this particular site on the corner of Berry and Pacific Highway, Pacific Highway, has been a site that sat around for a very, very, very long time. And it's a very difficult site because even developing in accordance with the current maximum height limit of RL 145, it triggers the prohibition within clause 6.3 of the LEP because it creates a net increase in solar access at between 12 and noon equinoxes and midwinter. So what we contemplated was introducing a new special area, which in and of itself would increase the amount of solar access in a special area. The important thing to bear in mind is that we didn't seek to increase the height because, we didn't seek an RL to increase the height. Council requested we did that because actually the provisions of the clause itself allow extra height if you don't cause shadows, which in this particular case, we don't in those areas. And we didn't seek to change the zone, but for bona fides that it was going to be commercial use and wouldn't in the future go to a residential use, we were willing, or the client was willing to cement that to be an employment use. So that's why the zone changed. But fundamentally, the first thing that we were looking at was clause 6.3 and how we could introduce a new special area. And the reason being is that having walked down Berry Street, you'll appreciate that this particular special area is quite constrained. At the Miller Street, not the Miller Street, at the Pacific Highway end corner on the other side of the road, it's actually internal within the Vodafone building. The next bit of the special area is the entry access to the Vodafone building. So it's actually a driveway and service facility. And then there's a little bit of area, and then the rest is actually within existing buildings. So the area, the special area actually transgresses the existing buildings that exist on the corner of Miller and Berry Street. So that special area will never be realised until those buildings are redeveloped and set back. So it's a particularly constrained area, and it's already quite affected by solar impact. So what we wanted to do was to introduce a new special area, and that's what this proposal does. And in so doing, we increase the solar access to something in the order of 39,000. I think that's the number, 37,000 additional solar hours. We create a brand new special area on our site, which fundamentally doesn't exist. And in so doing, we don't actually breach 6.3. So that's why we don't technically need an increased height. Happy to put an RL in if council wants it. And as I said, happy to do the commercial use. I just want to step through the concerns that council raised in relation to saying it's not consistent with their strategic policy. Council suggests the council's approval for employment space is only about 50% of its 2036 target. We are and will be increasing that. So I don't agree that it is not strategic. It is consistent with the strategic policy. It is delivering employment floor space. And given its location, 150 metres from the new station at Victoria Cross, I think it's a perfect strategic location. The area a special area that we'll be introducing is at least, it's not specifically nominated because it's a PP stage, about 800 square metres of additional discrete, contained, not linear, one space where it can be used in multiple ways and for public purposes and get sun. The concern has been raised about the potential impact on Miller Street special area. We've been at pains with extremely detailed solar analysis, which Henri and Carl will go through to explain that we do not, the planning proposal at the height indicated does not affect the Miller Street area. And as you said earlier at the beginning of this meeting, we're at the early stages. This is a proposal seeking to go to Gateway. This proposal deserves to have public exhibition, to deliver a new special area with solar access. And there's one extra thing that I think is really important to understand is that we only trigger the prohibition within clause 6.3 in March. In April through to September, we don't have any impact. It's only in March that, and Henri can confirm this when he comes to, he's nodding his head. So we get caught right at the beginning, of the process. So it's a somewhat unique planning proposal to deal with this clause and introduce a new special area. I'm not familiar with one occurring in this form, but it is, we saw this as not only an opportunity, but also a positive thing for Berry Street. It's delivering something that physically doesn't exist, delivering it in a way that will be far more usable, and delivering some really good architecture when the development comes to be actually designed. Now, there are questions raised in the report about some of the detail, a bit like the previous matter, they relate to the detail of the DA, but I think it's appropriate that perhaps the architects, Carl and Henri, deal with those when they talk to the issues of design. So perhaps I'll pass over to, I don't know which one it will be, Carl or Henri. Who's Henri's first? There you go. Thank you very much, Hannah.
Thank you. Yep.
Hello. Thank you. But as I say, just to give you our statement about the design, the proposal is an important opportunity to develop a prominent site in North Sydney. The proposal demonstrates the potential of the site for a landmark building, replacing a low-grade office building with poor amenity. The site has great future potential. It's located at the junction of two major thoroughfares, and this corner site is just approximately 150 metres from the future Victoria Metro Cross Station, which will be a major new hub in North Sydney. The scale of the tower is appropriate in terms of bulk and scale. It mediates between the scale of the Vodafone Tower and the sky to the south and the Sky apartments to the north. The proposed tower terminates the southern end of the street wall of buildings that extends to the north along the Pacific Highway. The tower aligns with the predominant building alignments to the Pacific Highway and Angelo Street, and it provides a compliant 5-metre setback to Berry Street. In a similar fashion to numerous other proposals in North Sydney, the proposed tower is sculpted to minimise its shadowing impact onto key areas. The design has no additional shadowing impact to the North Sydney special areas, with the exception of the Berry Street special area. However, I note the main concentration of the shadowing is concentrated on the service and loading area in front of the Vodafone Tower. In addition, the proposal has minimal effect to the Berry Street special area for approximately 2/3 of the specified period between the March equinox and the September equinox. The special area is only affected in the 30 days after March 31st and the 30 days before September 21st. So for the 4 months of midwinter, there is no difference in shadowing to the special area.
So can you just quantify that percentage of overshadowing during those 2-month periods that you've referred to? The 2 30-day periods you've referred to.
Yes. The well, sorry, to quantify it is what I'm saying is there is an increase in overshadowing in those 2 months, and I'll just quantify what it is. Sorry, I'll just quantify what it is to you in terms of the hours. It's a complex to sort of quantify it as such, but it. Sorry, I don't have the.
We can come back to that.
If you allow me to come back to that, but of course the important thing is that we're now introducing a new special area, so there will be a net increase of 40% solar overall when you combine the existing special area with the additional special area.
Yep.
Anyway, to continue, the proposed special area will provide a generous, new, well-proportioned public space in an area of North Sydney that has a notable lack of public spaces. The special area will be a mainly covered space ranging in height from 8 to 10 metres. The eastern edge of this space facing Angelo Streets gets mid-morning sun throughout the year. And I'd like to say there are many similar covered spaces in Sydney that function well as public spaces, especially in the rainy weather that Sydney is experiencing more frequently. In summary, this proposal represents a unique opportunity to transform a landmark site with a sculptural tower that will provide a high quality workplace and provide a significant public space at ground level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Unro. Do we wish to hear from Carl?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mine's very brief, and it's really just to reiterate what Sue has said in some respects, is that if you have been to site and walked down this part of Berry Street, that the Vodafone building takes up approximately 1/3 of that southern elevation, which is this special area, and there is no activation along there. I mean, that's a almost brand new building. There is a set of stairs, an accessible ramp. There is then, say, some louvered doors to a service cupboard, and then the entry to the building. And that's the area that we're essentially affecting. So that strip was never realised really as an amenity for the workers and the people of North Sydney in this particular area. So we're not actually really affecting anything of real amenity. There's only one cafe which is more than halfway down the block and which is partially undercover. So we're actually, in our view, and I think it's demonstrated in the drawings and the submission, we're actually providing an actual benefit. So 800 square metres of publicly accessible space with more solar access than the special area that we're talking about. And that area is a consolidated space that, has opportunities to provide real amenity to both workers and the public in this area of North Sydney, rather than what we were looking at before, which is just a strip along the edge of buildings on the southern side of Berry Street. So that's, go on.
I just need to clarify something, because something was said about the space being internal to the Vodafone building. But in fact, are you just talking about the small bit at the top of the steps?
No, so what they did was they didn't provide the area externally. They said, oh, we're providing public space within the building. So they didn't actually provide that strip anyway. And look, predominantly it's because there's 2 other buildings along that side of Berry Street, which may not get redeveloped for 20 or 30 years. So it was an interesting line on the paper. It was a good intention, but it's not going to ever realise that potential. And even if it did, it is literally just a strip of widened footpath. Whereas what we're saying is that we've got an opportunity to do a real activation here at the base of this building. It's a public space. There's 800 square metres of it, which is far in excess of the special area that we're talking about, and it actually provides more solar access than the special area. So this is actually a net benefit for this whole area here, and that's why we believe it should be supported.
Perhaps, Chair, I could just clarify a little bit about the internal bit, because it's something that's quite confusing. When the Part 3A approval was granted for the Vodafone building, the site covered the special area, and the special area is actually inside the building at that corner. The mapping that shows the area inside. It's a glazed area, fully glazed, so the sun gets in. So I think that was how they argued it at that time. Nothing to do with anyone on this call at the moment. At the other end of the street, Berry Street and Miller Street, the mapping shows the special area within existing undeveloped buildings. So they're never going to be realised until, as Carl has said, those sites are redeveloped into the future, and if happens, set back off the footpath that currently exists. It's a very weird situation. The only bits that are actually on footpath or actually physically available are, strangely enough, the servicing driveway of the Vodafone building, and then a bit of the cafe that I think that currently exists. And please, Carl, jump in if I've got those numbers wrong. So in terms of the usability of the existing special area, which triggers our prohibition, there's not much that we're seriously affecting, and we have the opportunity here to create a new special area and increase solar access, the whole purpose for the special area in the first place. So, and the control that exists. And as I said before, it's about, I know Andre was raising the issues of how much we impact the existing special area. We're actually creating 37,255 additional solar hours,
which is about a 45% increase.
Yeah, which is 40. Yeah.
And I'll just clarify, sorry, just about the question I couldn't answer regarding the reduction. First, the actual reduction, which only occurs in the months at either side of the period, is 15%. And just so you understand, the metric of solar hours that we've used is an hour of sun per meter squared. So solar hours is not an absolute term. It's sort of a term we've used in order to measure this. We've measured hours per square meter.
Yeah. But the key for the purposes of this planning proposal, which is a unique planning proposal, is that we're creating a special area. We're increasing the solar access, which is the purpose of the special area provisions, so that in so doing, the development of the building is consistent with that clause, because we've created a new special area. The clause talks about you must not overshadow a special area, not a particular special area, special areas, full stop. So by introducing a new special area, which special area is far more effective and delivers far better improvement in terms of solar access and public domain and usability and all of those things because of the uniqueness of the current Berry Street special area. We think this is a win-win-win. And then we deal with the fact that we're a location next to near the station, the fact that this building is otherwise an otherwise tired building but on a very prominent corner. It has great opportunity, and it increases employment strategically, satisfies the strategic case.
Okay, now I'm just going to open it up to the panel members for any questions that they may have. James, thank you.
Yeah, the Berry Street special area, the solar access provision to that is focused, if I'm right, on noon to 2 p.m.
Correct.
But obviously for the potential probably for lunchtime activities. So I'm just, my understanding is, again, there is more overshadowing in that time frame of the Berry Street special area. And if we interpret that as meaning the area behind the glazed facade of the Vodafone building, my understanding is there will be some greater overshadowing then. But your proposition is to offset that by more solar access that may not be necessarily between 12 and 2.
No, it is 12 and 2.
Area underneath your building.
No, it is 12 and 2.
No, our measurements are just between 12 and 2.
So the 37,000 hours is between 12 and 2.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, it's best to refer to it as a net increase of 42%.
Yeah, but between 12
and 2.
Between 12
in the
and 2.
necessary period. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. It would be very naughty of us to do otherwise.
It's a question?
Yeah.
Yes, Veronique.
Your presentation, particularly you, Miss Francis, is that you keep saying that you are keeping within the 145 RL.
No, it's one that they are out. So what I was saying was, we don't technically need to increase the height, because if you read clause 6.33, it says you can increase the height of a building, i.e. more than RL 145, if you don't increase the shadows within the specified period. It takes a bit of reading. With this new special area, we wouldn't be. So that's why technically we don't need to increase the RL in our view. However, we have amended the planning proposal to increase it to 172.
Yes, that's correct.
Yep.
And in fact, which is above the gazetted height, shall we say, that are on
absolutely, which is why it's a planning proposal. Yep.
Yeah, I did want to put that on because
don't deny that one.
Thank you. That was my question.
Okay. So it's a net increase.
Net increase of 42%.
During those hours.
Yes. Yeah. The measured hours, the quantum of hours measured is only during the hours, the subject of the clause 6.3, because they're the only things that
count.
Count, yes.
Okay. Very well. Any other questions from panel members? No. And of course, it is currently a commercial building. It's 100% commercial, as opposed to having residential.
Yeah.
Which the zoning would indicate.
Yes, it is commercial at the moment.
Okay. All right then. Well, thank you very much for your assistance in this and addressing the panel. And we will be making our recommendation to council. I think you will understand what our panel's role is in this matter, so don't need to reiterate
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you
all.
very much.
Thank you, Chair and panel members.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Very well. Now we'll move on to the third matter, item 3, which is 12 to 14 Waters Road, Neutral Bay. And I don't know if you've just come on board, the people that are making submissions to the panel, but we said earlier that we've all had the benefit of the council's report, but plus done site inspections. So I do have the Willoughby Bay Precinct, Meredith Trevelyan Jones. Would you like to address the panel first?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, very well.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the panel. The Willoughby Bay Precinct supports the recommendation of Council's strategic planner that this planning proposal not proceed to gateway determination. I've been the chair of Willoughby Bay Precinct for only a few months, since February. However, I have been aware of this particular site for a considerable period of time as an office bearer at Brightmoor Precinct, the adjacent precinct, when the property was brought to Brightmoor Precinct's attention when a development application was submitted in, I think it was April of last year, and a number of residents came to the precinct meeting concerned about the development application. And this was an unusual thing for Brightmoor Precinct because whilst residents often come with issues to do with developments in residential areas, this was the first time in the period that I've been involved with Brightmoor Precinct, about 6 years, where residents had actually come along to address Precinct about a development in the Neutral Bay Town Centre, so in the B4 zone. And a major concern was the increase in height that was being proposed in the development application. And I should note that the development application is by the same proponent as the planning proposal. So it is the same group. It's not a different owner or developer that was proposing that development application. The development application was seeking approval for a 6-storey building, considerably above the 16-metre height limit. There were objections lodged by Brightmoor Precinct and I believe by residents as well. And revised plans were submitted for a 5-storey building. And it is that development application that is currently approved. So development application was 92 of 21, and the approved height is 21.3 metres in the 16-metre zone. And I would comment that there's been a reasonable amount of development going ahead in the Neutral Bay Town Centre without arising the ire of local residents. This development has been proceeding in accordance with the LEP height limit of 16 metres and has generally been approved by the local community. So this was unusual to see a proposal for something much higher than the height limit and getting local residents upset. The reason that was given by the proponents for putting in a proposal that was significantly higher than the 16-metre height limit was that council had previously adopted the Military Road Corridor Planning Study in February 2021, which proposed, without giving a height limit in metres, it talked of a general increase in height in the Neutral Bay Town Centre to 6 stories. The building that's been approved is 5 stories, and as I said, 21.3 metres high. If the members of the panel have had the benefit of a site inspection, you might have noticed the building immediately adjacent to the subject site at 4 to 8 Waters Road. That is also a 5-storey building. It has 1 level of retail and 4 levels of apartments above that. And it complies with the 16-metre height limit. So I think council has been relatively, council's planners and probably the planning panel, since it would have been a variation to the height under clause 4.6, have been pretty generous to the developers in allowing a building of 21.3 metres. My understanding is that there is a sales office in Young Street around the corner and that apartments are being sold in the building off the plan. So I presume that the developers are proceeding with the current development. There has been a report in the the local press that one of the apartments has sold for $7 million. I don't know if that's true, of course, but it's a report. So it certainly seems that sales are proceeding, and it's certainly advertised in the real estate press. And of course, after the council elections in December, the new council has now rescinded the Military Road Corridor Planning Study. So the strategic framework, which allows 6 stories, no longer exists. And the basing a planning proposal on that planning study, you know, it's been cut out from underneath the planning proposal. So I guess what we need to look at, and what I would hope that the panel will look at, is, you know, what are the site-specific merits, if any? What are the benefits, if any, that are provided by the planning proposal? And certainly Willoughby Bay Precinct looked at the plans, what was being proposed, and also public benefits that were being suggested under a voluntary planning agreement, and could not support and specifically opposed the planning proposal. Specifically, the height is not in character with its environs. And if you have walked around the area, you would see that most of the buildings around there, if they haven't been redeveloped, they may be 2 or 3 stories. If they have been redeveloped, they're typically 5 stories high. So this would make, if this planning proposal were to proceed, it would make this building the highest building within the Neutral Bay town centre. We believe that it would set an undesirable precedent for this to be to proceed in the absence of a strategic framework of a planning study. And we note that council's policy is in fact not to support planning proposals unless there is a planning study, a strategic framework that supports that. If this were to proceed, there are some, so we would ask that the panel recommend that council not support the planning proposal proceeding to gateway determination. But if it were to proceed to gateway determination, we believe there are a couple of things that should be considered. And one of those is the provision of non-residential space as a basement level. So the planning proposal seeks an increase in height from 16 metres to 26 metres, along with an increase in the minimum non-residential FSR. As alluded to in the Strategic Planner's report, council has been seeking to prevent the loss of employment space within the Neutral Bay town centre. And certainly the Military Road Corridor Planning Study gave us 2 reasons why it was prepared: was 1, development pressure, and 2, potential loss of employment space. So I can understand why council sought to have an increase in the minimum non-residential FSR. Unfortunately, there is no FSR limits set on the site. So it's not as if it becomes a portion of what can be developed on the site. And I have to say that the developers in this case have seen an opportunity to provide an increase in minimum non-residential FSR, so supposedly what the council is seeking, but has put it underground, which is not really what, I mean, it is subpar space that is being provided. So if the panel wanted to support this proceeding to gateway, I do think there needs to be some advice given to council that any non-residential space should be above ground, where it can provide useful commercial office suites. I'd also comment that the precinct was concerned about what was being proposed in the voluntary planning agreement as public benefits, and that they seem to be things that were already included in the approved development application, namely a 1.5 metre wide footpath to Waters Lane and streetscape landscaping. Now, the streetscape landscaping is required to be provided as a condition of consent of the existing DA, And I would assume any future development of the site, if this DA did not proceed for whatever reason, council would seek to impose similar conditions for new streetscape paving and landscaping. And it would make sense when you look at the plans for the ground floor, where you have retail space, that you would provide some sort of footpath. And currently there is no setback of the building from the roadway, or virtually no setback. So it makes sense for any development and any council looking at any development proposal to insist on a footpath in any case. Comment that the precinct thought that a much better approach on a provision of public benefit would be something similar to what Parramatta Council requires in their policy, which would be 10% of the 50% of the uplift value. But North Sydney Council at this stage does not have such a policy. So once again, I'd like to thank you very much, Chair and members of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Trevelyan-Jones. Now, can I call on Daniel Barber and Benjamin Knowles to address the panel? And if you could also respond to some of the issues that have been raised. So,
evening, panel members. My name's Daniel and this is Benjamin. We're from Central Element. I'll just start off mentioning that I'll be speaking to the objective of our plan proposal, the strategic merit, and then my colleague Benjamin will be speaking about the comments about height and quality of the basement space. The first to start off to respond to Meredith. I thought actually Meredith did a really good summary and prelude into the proposal and the overall strategic plan. Generally, I actually agree with most of what Meredith is saying.
We can't hear.
I'm afraid
the analogy of the process.
Sorry, you have to stop because we haven't heard it all. You've got a very bad connection there. So just start again. Yeah, I mean, we heard what you said about the submission, but I'd need to hear what you're going to say about this now.
Yes, yeah, sure. So I was just mentioning, I'll be speaking about the strategic merit.
I heard that.
Oh, yes, okay. So I was just mentioning that we listened to the concerns raised by Meredith. And I think she actually provided a very succinct summary.
Heard that.
So what our intent is essentially the plan proposal is we are increasing the height by 1 story. So we're increasing it by 3.35 meters. So just one level from what's approved, which is 6 stories in accordance with the draft strategy, the strategy that was rescinded. And we're also increasing the non-residential to 1.2 as required in that strategy. What Meredith mentioned about there should be some form of value capture.
This is the strategy that's been rescinded.
That's correct. When we lodged, it was presently lodged, but was rescinded in January. That's correct.
Yep.
So we actually agree with Meredith. There should be, in our view, some form of value capture with all future proposals in the centre. And that's what we've acknowledged. So we've actually, the draft or the former strategy just recommended we provide upgrades to Waters Lane and a 1.5 metre whole of building setback to increase solar access to the laneway and increase the footpath width. So that's what we're doing in accordance to that strategy, but we're also offering 2 million circa in public domain upgrades as part of a value capture offer we did with the independent economic consultant as part of this plan proposal. So we're trying to create a new benchmark and a new culture in Neutral Bay where that is done, where that there's a nexus between uplift in residential floor area and public domain benefits. And that's what we've included in our proposal. And that's what we're seeking. Hopefully council will consider that, whilst we are seeking the height, 1 additional story, we are then providing that nexus with public domain benefits circa 2 million plus setting back the whole building from the laneway where we actually do lose a lot of floor area from doing that. So I'll give you a little bit of the background, which Meredith has talked about with our planning proposal and the reasons why we're doing a planning proposal for 1 story. So effectively in 2020, we secured the site 12 Waters Road, which is next door, and we have approval for a 5-story scheme. Council really wanted us to amalgamate with 14 Waters Road because it would have provided a larger site with a lot of public benefits that could have been delivered at the same time. So what we ended up doing was we approached the neighbour at 14 Waters Road, and there was a draft plan at the time for 6 stories. So we weren't comfortable in purchasing that site until there was some kind of a surety about 6 stories. In January last year, the strategy was approved for 6 stories by all the councillors, and it was written into the housing strategy and the North Sydney strategic local statement. So at that point, we had a surety to do a deal with the neighbour at 14 Waters Road and deliver upon the strategy and provide a more holistic proposal. So we ended up having a deal with that owner, and council advised us it was likely end of 2021. The LEP maps would have been amended to facilitate an extra level, subject to an increase in 1.2 non-residential. So we submitted a DA for 6 stories on the site on that basis last year. What happened by the end of last year, we're advised that due to staff shortages, and I think a bit of politics, that council won't be finalising that LEP amendment until the year after. So we decided to lodge a planning proposal for 1 extra level in accordance with the strategy. Now what happened was we decided to take off the 6-story, keep it as 5 stories. And then what happened was by the end of the year, we were hoping to have gateway determination early this year, but then we were surprised in January that a new set of councillors came in that rescinded the strategy. So we're in a tricky point that no longer were we fully consistent with the strategy because it was no longer endorsed. Now we've actually started this month, we're starting construction on the 5-story scheme. And we've appealed to council and the councillors that we feel a real shame that if we don't get an extra level, there'll be a circa 2 million in public domain benefits that won't occur, which is what the strategy envisioned for this site. Well, actually envisioned Waters Lane. We're proposing actually to do all of Waters Lane and either half the plaza or along the whole of Grosvenor Street as public domain benefits as part of voluntary planning agreement. We've concluded this, and also setting back the building 1.5 from the laneway. So if this planning proposal, the 6-story, doesn't occur, we'll be proceeding based on the 5-story scheme that doesn't offer those public benefits. So that's kind of like the background, I guess, the proposal and what strategy was rescinded. However, reading the plan proposal, making guidelines to have strategic merit, you don't have to be just, it's not a yes or no answer in black and white. You can have strategic merit with not being consistent with endorsed strategy. It's the strategies, this strategy was identified in the strategic local planning statement as a short-term action to achieve job growth. It's in the housing strategy as well. It's in the district plan. It's in the metropolitan strategy. So all these strategies are identified as something that was going to be delivered. And that's part of the reason that we committed to purchasing the neighbour's property on the basis of 6 stories, because of all the surety. And then all the strategic work's done, we're 100% consistent with that strategy. So that's pretty much our view on strategic merit, and also the investment of the B line that increases services and which enables better connections with jobs and housing. So that's pretty much it for me from strategic and background. If you have any questions, otherwise I'll move on to Benjamin to speak about height and the quality of the commercial space. Oh, sorry, I think you're on mute there.
Yeah, we can't hear you. You're on mute.
Yep, thank you very much. If we can hear from Benjamin now, that would be good.
Yeah, pleasure, of course. So I think, yeah, look, I'll speak to 2 items, obviously the basement and then the height. I think, as Daniel mentioned, this is obviously quite a unique circumstance, this planning proposal, in the sense that the additional 1.2 has actually, in fact, already been approved as part of the current DA, and we are commencing construction on that, as Daniel mentioned, this month. In terms of the retail, and again, a little bit of context, when we acquired 14 Waters Road and looked at doing the joint amalgamation site opportunity, and being transparent with the panel here, we had actually been approached by a large format grocer supermarket operator who's been looking at space in the area for quite some time. In terms of their requirement, they actually required 2 levels of grocer space, which through the process with council as part of the DA, we realised, and speaking with council, that it would have in fact resulted in a lesser outcome for the public domain, in the sense that there wouldn't have been any fine grain retail activation, which was a fundamental objective of council. So as part of the DA process, we did amend the design to limit the supermarket or the greengrocer component to the below ground space, in turn transforming the ground plane into a series of beautiful fine grain tenancies, which is per the proposal as you see today. In terms of the supermarket or the grocer below and the quality of that space, we understand council has their concerns about the viability of that space and the quality of the space. And again, just being transparent, the space has been very well received. As mentioned by Meredith, we have commenced sales and marketing for the residential component, as well as leasing for the retail component under our current consent, noting that there is no difference in the retail component between our current consent and the planning proposal. And we're actually, in fact, very close to leasing the basement space. We currently have a number of competing offers for that space, which has all been very positive, and it's been very well received in the market, just given that there is such a shortage of large format retail space in Neutral Bay, being such a tightly held space. So I think from our perspective, we don't have any personal concerns regarding the viability. Naturally, it's a very high quality development. We've appointed Richard Crooks as the builder, which is obviously a phenomenal reputation and will be delivered to the highest standards. Secondly, to the concerns regarding height, as Daniel mentioned, we are in.
Sorry, can I just clarify one thing about
Of
the basement and the amount of commercial at grade?
Yes.
Yeah, I just need to understand the differences between the planning proposal, what you're proposing here in the planning proposal, as what's approved.
They're exactly the same.
Oh,
So the planning proposal doesn't vary the amount of retail space relative to the consent.
Which is 1.2.
Yeah, which is 1.2. So, and again, this is a very unusual circumstance in the sense that we already have the approved DA and then we have this planning proposal. The planning proposal, all it's seeking is one additional residential floor at the top. Everything below that level is exactly the same. There's no change.
Okay.
May I ask just a detailed question? Sorry, because there wasn't detail. Your large format grocer, is that about 300 meters square? Or what's
No, it's about 1,000 square meters on the lower level. And then there is a component of back of house, which is about 300 square meters on ground level, which is actually subterranean due to the fall in the slope, which is for storage and things like that connected to the loading dock.
Okay, thank you.
And can I ask what's the floor to ceiling height of that basement or semi-basement space?
It varies quite a bit, but it's approximately sort of 3.5 to 4.5 meters in height.
And there's a submission that I included to the panel a few days ago. You may have seen that includes a CGI of the basement retail that shows exactly how it looked like.
Yeah.
We do have an image of it if you would like us to share it now, if that was allowed.
Yes, you can share it. Yes.
Then let me just give me 1 minute.
Whilst Benjamin's getting that, I thought I'd mention too also that Coles is building a large format Coles adjacent to the site in the basement as part of the future proposal. And it's a pretext of council that they prefer the supermarket to be located in a basement right at grade level because it creates blank facades to each frontage.
So can everyone see this image?
Yep.
So this is an artist's impression of that basement space, which has been used for the leasing campaign. So you can see it is a very generous height space there. And then further to that as well, we did prepare this. This is obviously the current condition along Grosvenor Street, and then this is what we're proposing. So this will be beautiful fine grain retail with public domain activation, etc.
And just to mention that 2 million circa of public domain improvements we're doing, that's in addition to all the public domain improvements we're doing surrounding the 3 street frontages.
Yeah. So perhaps before we speak to the height, I think let's continue on the public domain aspect, and we can come back to this. This diagram here, I think, captures it quite well in terms of what we're proposing. Obviously, our site just located here. Everything in orange is the public domain works that has been approved as part of the DA, which we've commenced construction on, being to Waters Road and to Grosvenor Street. And then as part of the planning proposal, due to being able to provide an additional level of residential, we're able to provide this circa $2 million contribution to additional public domain upgrades, which we're suggesting will be the pedestrianisation of all of Waters Lane, shown here in green, and as shown here in concept form to the right. And then in addition to that, we've had, builders and QS pricing. There will be additional funds as part of that $2 million, which could either be used to continue the public domain works, which you just saw in the CGI, right along Grosvenor Street to the east, along the Woolworth site, or in turn creating part of the future Grosvenor Plaza, which is council's objective. Importantly, noting that if we did option B in terms of the blue plaza here, there would be no loss of parking, as that would be offset in the 60 non-residential spaces we're providing on our site, which has already been approved as part of the DA. In terms of the height, I think it's probably best spoken to this diagram here. So just to clarify, this is an elevation of the development of Grosvenor Street, showing the 6-story scheme. The red line that you see here is the approved DA, which is currently approved, which we're building, being the 5 stories. The blue line is obviously the outline of the 6-story scheme. As Daniel mentioned, there is only a 3.35 metre height difference between the two, representing just that additional level of residential. And in terms of the height standard in councils, we do note that in council's report, they did have concerns at the numerical 26 metres, recommending 24 metres, which we've noted that we're happy to accept. We feel that's fine and reasonable. As you can see here, the scheme would still comply with the 24 metres. The only breach would be this section here, which relates to the lift overruns and the communal facilities on the roof. Communal facilities being bathrooms for the swimming pool that we're providing on the roof for residents. Noting also that that form is completely recessed from street and wouldn't be visible from the public domain around it surrounding the site. Was there any questions around that, or did that all make sense?
Yeah, I'll just ask you can continue if you wish, and then I'll ask the panel to ask questions.
Yeah, okay, sure. So look, I think that summarises the overall height issues, and I think we've spoken to the public domain issues. Again, we had this presentation, just to reiterate, it is just the additional 6-story. And in terms of that built form, this is a landscape plan prepared by Arcadia of the rooftop. You can see that we are providing an incredible retail or incredible residential offering in terms of communal space for the residents. And that this additional height, which numerically it does seem large, going from 24 metres beyond the initial consent or the initial height standard of 16 metres even, but really that only relates to the lift overruns and the communal facilities in the centre of the site, which isn't visible. If you consider the actual height standard, they've actually very much aligned, being only a marginal breach.
Okay,
right. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll open it up for questions if you'd like to unshare. Thank you.
No problem.
May I ask?
Yes.
Of course.
Yeah, my question is, go back to your first one where your first DA is and where there's that notch in your diagram. Is that where it was also the exceedance of the 16 metres to 21.3?
My understanding, the exceedance is a result of
DA.
the communal facilities.
No. In your diagram, I just want to clarify, because I didn't see the other DA that you've got approved. Was that also where the exceedance was to 21.3 to the 16 metres you were approved to, as it were?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify. Sorry. Thanks.
No, that's fine.
Okay, any other questions from the panel, James?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you, Jan.
Michael?
No questions.
No? Very well. And we will be making a recommendation to the council on this, as I indicated for the others, and it'll be on the website within the next 7 days or less. But I thank the submitter and the applicants for their submissions, and as I said, we'll be making that recommendation. I just have one question in respect of, in terms of floor to ceiling heights and in terms of the 24-metre building, I suppose because you have retail on the ground floor, the 21.3 metres that's already approved is, I suppose, quite generous for a 5-storey building as such.
Mm.
And is that the reason, because of the floor to ceiling height on the ground floor?
Yeah, there's a few factors at play, and I think it's important to note it is a challenging site given the topography of the site, and that there is approximately a single story fall from Waters Road to Waters Lane. So from a design perspective, in terms of creating retail that follows the street, in terms of following the slope along Grosvenor Street, it does become quite challenging in that you have a variety of different ceiling heights.
Mm.
So in terms of setting on the Waters Lane side being the lower side, appropriate ceiling heights for retail of, of a high quality, as that follows up the street, just naturally trying to, manage the site's height for the residential above, you do end up with considerably larger, higher floor to ceiling heights. So for example, one of the tenancies there has a ceiling height of closer to 4.4 meters, which really addresses that, which then as you follow that up through the overall building, you do end up with this greater overall height. But I think it's important.
4.4 for the greatest floor to ceiling, and then what is the lowest floor to ceiling for that retail component?
3.5.
3.5. Okay.
And to note, if we were to comply with the 16-metre height limit, historically the controls were based on 2.7 for retail. Now the ADG stipulates under Part 3A, the ADG prevails, it must. Yeah. So that's a big part of it. Is that we would thought 2.7 floor to ceiling for the retail would just be insufficient.
And I think just the final point on that is that essentially 3.5 or 4 meters of the total building height does relate to that lift overrun and communal facilities on the center of the roof. It was raised as part of the DA approval process that the panel would like us to provide showers for the swimming pool, as well as change facilities and bathrooms. Noting obviously that, families might be there and they might have grandchildren which may need to use the bathroom, not having to go downstairs. So we did look to provide all of those facilities. And we did provide an additional parapet height above those facilities in the lift overrun so that we could conceal some of the building plant on the roof, just to maximize, in short, the amount of communal garden space that we are providing for the residents. Which, as we mentioned, that sort of 3 to 4 meters is recessed from the perimeter of the building by 6 to 8 meters and non-visible from the street.
Okay, all right then. Well, thank you very much, as I said, for your presentations, and we'll be making our recommendation. Good
Lovely.
afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.